Hi guys, welcome back for another Purim prep video. Tomorrow is actually Purim. So we have to do the last finishing touches. Right now, I just pulled out of the freezer this crown challah that we made in last week's video. If you didn't see that, we did some Purim prep. And we made challah and deli tashin, which I froze for it to stay fresh. So first thing this morning, we're going to take it out because this especially will need a lot of time to defrost. I think I'm going to get it onto a cooling rack, so if there's any moisture, it should just drip off. Now if you want to see last week's video, I will have it linked for you in the cards on top, and I can have it linked in the description as well for you. And over there we made this. Like I said, we made the deli tashin, which I'm going to pull out of the freezer next. And I believe that was it for that video. Now I had some extra deli tashin filling, and I said that when I go to the store, I'm going to get some puff pastry. Now a day or two later, before I even went to the store, I made another challah dough, so I made more challah deli tashin. I'm going to open them up to let any moisture out. And I also told you guys in the last video about Mishloach Manos, how we give a food package, a food gift with 2 blessings, 2 different food types. I told you about it, but in today's video we're going to make oatmeal chocolate chip cookies, wrap it up. We're going to make some popcorn and wrap that up. And we're going to put together the Mishloach Manos as well. And my daughter is making granola bars for her friend, and she wants to show you how she makes that and wraps that up as well. And then I explained also that these food items here are for a Purim party that my in-laws host every year at the first night of Purim. And for this, I'm also going to make 2 potato kugels today, and we're going to make let me see what the recipe calls it. I know that a francs and blancs is always goes by my in-laws. But I wanted to make a little twist to it. Pull apart francs and blancs. I will have recipes linked for you down below, but this is what it's going to look like. So we're going to make this as well. So now that we have this out, we can get to work. First thing I'm going to show you is me making the oatmeal chocolate chip cookies. Now this was late the night before, and I set up the camera. I have to hit record. So I had put in 2 sticks of margarine, 1 cup of sugar, 2 cups of brown sugar. Now I will add in 2 eggs. Next I'm going to do a tablespoon of vanilla sugar. If you don't have vanilla sugar, you can just do a little bit more sugar and use vanilla extract. Instead, I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of baking soda, a little bit of salt, a sprinkle of it, a teaspoon of baking powder, 2 cups of flour, 2.5 cups of oatmeal. You want the 1-minute oatmeal. And then a package of chocolate chips. Now I'm gonna mix this together. The margarine I had left out for not even that long, 15 minutes, maybe a half an hour, and it helped it combine very easily. Now this hook that I'm using over here, I usually use for cookie dough, and was struggling a bit, so you'll see later on I needed more cookie dough. I made a second batch and I started off with the beaters, and just so you know, the second batch came out very crummy. So I'm thinking I should have done this. I probably should have left the margarine out a little bit longer so that it can be a little bit more room temperature, and combine a little bit easier everything together. So at this point my oven is already preheated to 400 degrees. So I'm going to get to shaping the cookies. So I'm lining 2 cookie sheets with parchment paper, and we're going to get the cookies directly onto the parchment paper lined cookie sheets as we shape them. So to shape the cookies, I'm using a 2 tablespoon cookie scoop, and as you can see, the cookie dough is still crummy, but because the margarine was softer, I was able to push them into the, like I'm doing right here, just pushing them into like a flat circle once I scooped up the correct amount, and this is holding up beautifully, unlike you'll see with the second batch where it was just falling apart a lot faster. So that's what I'm doing. I'm scooping in my hand, I'm pressing it together and shaping it. I didn't remember if the cookies will stay domed or it'll flatten out as it bakes. So I flattened it a little bit, and they do flatten a lot more as they bake. So leave some space around the cookies when you're baking it, and I'm going to do this for the entire batch of cookie dough. Once I have both trays filled, I am going to get it into the oven, and I'm going to bake this for 15 minutes. So while the first 2 trays are in the oven, I'm getting a parchment paper onto the counter, and I'm going to get the rest of the dough ready to be baked. I'm going to scoop them and shape them so that once the first batch comes out of the oven and I can remove those cookies from the cookie sheet onto a cooling rack, I can get the next batch going right away and I don't have to wait around after that. And at this point, I also see that I don't have enough cookies. I know how many cookies I need, and I am short a few, so I decide to go ahead and make an additional half a batch of cookies. Maybe that was also my mistake, that I did half a batch and not a full batch. But I think it has more to do with the margarine temperature. So I'm quickly putting together another half a batch of the cookie dough. I wasn't sure if I'm going to have enough brown sugar, that's why I decided to half it, and I figured that that would give me plenty for the amount that I was missing to have the amount that I need to be able to make my Mishloach Manos. So I'm just taking the recipe and halving everything. It's a very simple recipe to half because everything is equal amounts. Now at this point, the first batch is ready to come out of the oven. So I got out a couple of cooling racks and I'm getting those trays out. And once it has cooled a little bit, I am using an offset spatula to remove the cookies from the cookie sheet and getting them directly onto the cooling rack so that they can cool a lot faster. And what I actually did was that I took the cooling rack and I put it into the freezer once the cookies have cooled a little bit so that they cooled completely and I was able to wrap them up still the same night, and I didn't have to leave it for the day that I'm recording this video. Now once I have all the cookies off, I can take those prepared cookies that we had shaped earlier and get them onto the tray, fill the tray up, and get it into the oven and get baking again. And now I can get to shaping the second batch of cookie dough that I made, and you can see over here that the oats are a lot drier, and especially towards the end you can see that they're not really holding its shape like the last few. They are really dry, and I have to be very careful when I'm moving them, especially moving from this onto the tray to bake, that they shouldn't fall apart. Once they baked up and the margarine um, sort of like melted completely and then it hardened back up, it was fine and it's holding up nicely. It's just a bit more crummy, the texture, when you're eating it. A little bit drier, but it's still good. And now that the first batch has cooled, I am going to break one open and show you the inside and taste it. And first of all, taste-wise, this is just as good as I remember. And I don't know why I didn't make this in years. This is a crunchy outside, chewy but textured interior because of the oats and because the chocolate was still hot, was still melty, it was delicious. Next, I am preparing the tags that will go on the cookie packaging and the popcorn packaging. I had gotten a pack of tags with a roll of twine to be able to tie it up, and I printed up some labels. For the cookies, I wrote "Giddy up and grab a cookie," and for the popcorn, I wrote "Ranch popped." So I'm getting those labels on so that they're ready to go whenever I am packaging up those items. Now these cookies are ready to be wrapped up. So what I'm doing is I got a bunch of food grade wax paper, and I'm figuring out how to package them up the easiest. First I tried side by side with the ribbon just once going around. That didn't work very well, so I did it from both sides, the length and the width, and was better, but still not, until I finally figured that I'll stack them. And that's the easiest way. I stack them and I wrap them the width and the length and attach a tag, and that's the way I did it. And I did wrapped all of the cookies that I needed, and any remaining cookies I placed into a cookie jar for us to have and enjoy. So now we can get going on the pull apart franks and blanks. And for this, the recipe does call for a 9-inch springform pan, which I don't have one for meat. I have one for dairy that I use for cheesecakes, so I cannot use it for this application over here. So instead, I'm using I believe it's a 10-inch round cake pan, because I don't have any other. I would have used disposable, but I don't have one in my house at the moment. So I am lining that with parchment paper for ease of getting it out of the pan later on instead of using the springform pan. And to create a hole in the center to be able to put a dipping sauce that we're going to make later, I am going to get a ramekin out, spray that with some oil spray, and put it in the center of the cake pan. And we're going to put our franks and blanks around that. To form the franks and blanks, I am using square puff pastry, and I'm going to cut it into 3 strips. And then we're going to take cocktail franks and roll it up one at a time and place it inside the pan that we prepared. You want to space them about half an inch apart so that as it's baking, the puff pastry can puff up. As I roll them up, I'm going to place one at a time into the pan, and I'm starting closest to the ramekin, getting them all around in a circle, and then doing another circle. And I didn't have enough for the third circle going around, and on the picture they show a lot more. They show 3 full circles. They do list how many ounces of cocktail franks and how many ounces of the puff pastry squares, and I followed it, and I had 2 little puff pastry for the amount of cocktail franks that I had. Had I had more puff pastry, I could have done the full amount of franks, but otherwise I would get less franks next time and just make it smaller. But I was only able to work with what I had. I didn't have any more in the puff pastry in the house to defrost and maybe bake it later. So I just had to go with it. And we have like 2.5 circles going around the ramekin, and that is what it's going to be. The good thing is that I'm not the only one making food for this party tonight. So there's going to be more food. I don't have to be worried that people will go hungry because it's not enough. This bakes in a 375-degree oven for 45 minutes to an hour. So we're jumping a little bit between all the things that we're getting ready between today and the day before and a couple days before, whenever I was getting all these things ready. Now we are making the popcorns the day before Purim, and I got this Dash popcorn maker, and first of all, I'm in love with it. Absolutely the easiest thing ever. So I'm putting in 2 tablespoons of oil in there, and I'm going to put in a half a cup of popcorn, and this pops amazing. Usually when we make popcorn at home, we do it in a pot. The tricky thing about that is that if you make more than one batch, for some reason for us, the second batch usually fails. No matter if we get the pot completely dry, because maybe some moisture is still left in there. I don't know, but for some reason the second time it just never does what it should be doing. So I knew that on this day I'm going to need to make a lot more popcorn than just the one batch. So I invested in this popcorn machine, and wow, this was so easy. Delicious popcorn. and you'll see that we do it probably 4 times to have the amount of popcorn that I need. Once the popcorn is done popping, we're gonna flip it over, and if you want to use this as a bowl, you would add the seasoning in here, put the bottom back on it, shake it to distribute that seasoning, and then eat straight from this. But since I know that I'm going to need a lot more, and um, I want to be able to continue popping some more popcorn seeds, I transferred it into a big bowl. And I'm seasoning it with Himalayan pink salt, and I'm going to toast it in the bowl to coat. Now, as you can see, the first little bit I'm doing by just shaking the bowl, but I didn't feel like it got the proper coverage, and it didn't have enough salt. So I added more salt and I toasted by hand to get it all evenly coated. And then I'm getting my second batch of popcorn going before I am going to start filling and making more popcorn. Filling the bags and making more popcorn. Once the second batch of popcorn is done, I am flipping it over, and then I'm going to add the popcorn into the bowl, season it with salt, toast it all together. And I'm not getting the machine going again for the third batch because I'm not sure how much popcorn I actually need. And I think one batch of popcorn filled about 10 5x7 bags. So I'm filling these bags by hand because I tried using first a measuring cup or like different things, and it just didn't work. So I'm filling it by hand, clean hands obviously, filling it to almost the top, using the ribbon to tie it closed. So I'm doing a double knot first, putting the tag in, double knotting again to make sure that everything stays put. And I'm doing this until I use up all my tags. I'm not keeping count because I know that I have the correct amount of tags ready. So once I'm done with the tags, I have the right amount of bags of popcorn. So I am doing all this. Once I see that I'm running low on the popcorn, I'm getting going on my third batch, and was perfect timing. By the time the popcorn was done, I was filling my last bag. So I transferred that popcorn into my bowl, seasoned it, toasted it, and I'm doing another batch because even though, from my estimation, the 3 batches is enough for me, but my daughter also wants to give some to her friends, so I figured I'll get a jump start for her and get a batch of popcorn going. Now my daughter is gonna make her granola bars. So she's starting off with a 3/4 cup of peanut butter in a pan. Now the recipe that I gave her said to make it in a small saucepan, melt the peanut butter and honey, and then combine the rest of the ingredients in a bowl, and then transfer this hot mixture over top of the rest of the ingredients and mix it in. But instead of getting a pot and a bowl dirty, this is how I usually do it. I do it in a bigger pot, and I melt the peanut butter and the 3/4 cup peanut butter and half a cup of honey, melt it, and then I add everything in there, and I just have one thing to clean instead of two. And while the peanut butter and honey are melting, you want to keep on mixing it to make sure that it combines and it doesn't burn. Once that is melted, we're going to add in 2 cups of rolled oats, 1 cup of rice cereal, or Rice Krispies, with 1 to 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed, as well as a teaspoon of vanilla and a cup of mini chocolate chips. Now, my daughter did struggle mixing this together, so she asked me for help. So I finished combining it for her. And once it is ready, we are going to transfer this into a lined 9 by 13. And then I find the easiest way to flatten this out is to just do it with my hands. Um, like you can see, I started off with a spatula, but it was not working very well, so I gave up very quickly. And I know from previous experience that it's just the easiest to do by hand. Um, because I do it in the pot that I combine everything, you can see that all the chocolate chips melted. This is what happens when I use the mini chocolate chips. That's why sometimes I will use just a regular size chocolate chip. So what I did over here, because it all melted, is that we sprinkled some more chocolate chips on top and I pressed it in so that hopefully when we cut it, the chocolate chips will stay in there and will not come off. Okay, the next thing we're working on is the potato kugel, and I will be making two 9 by 13, so I'm going to be doubling my recipe. My usual recipe has 10 potatoes and one large onion, like the biggest onion you can find. So I am going to peel 20 potatoes and quarter and peel two large onions. And while I'm doing this, my daughter is cutting up the granola bars that she made at this point about 24 hours ago. And this was a mistake because it was very set. So it was hard for her to cut it. She asked me for help, so I paused the peeling potatoes for a moment. I helped her cut it. We cut them 1.5 inch wide, and then we just cut it in half to make it like a bar shape. And once um, those are cut, she's going to start wrapping them in the paper, and I will continue with the peeling. Also, our school has the few days leading up to Purim. They have different themed dress up days. So, like on this day, it was pajama day, so she got to go to school in her pajamas. They had one day like a glow in the dark, one day was just dressed like a staff member. So they have a lot of fun with it. So, yes, it's the middle of the day, but she's still wearing pajamas because she wore that to school. Once I'm done with the peeling, I am cracking a dozen eggs into a large bowl. Again, I'm doubling my recipe. Usually I would be using 6 eggs. Because I'm doubling, I need 12. Now I'm using store-bought eggs, even though at this point I get so many eggs from my chickens. But I wasn't sure that I'm going to have enough on this day. So as security, I had bought a dozen when I was in the grocery the last time. And I chose to use it for this so that selfishly my family can enjoy the homestead eggs for ourselves. Okay, my camera angle is very off here, but what I'm doing is I'm shredding the potatoes and onions. What I'm doing is I'm alternating potatoes with the onions so that to prevent the onions from browning. With the onion in between there, it doesn't brown as fast. And every like 5 potatoes and half onion that I go through, I am transferring all of this into the bowl that has the eggs, um, so that the machine doesn't overfill. So, and then I'm going to start over and do it again. 5 potatoes, 2 onions, and get it into the bowl again. Once all of the potatoes and onions are shredded, I am going to mix it all together to combine the eggs with the potatoes and onions. And this I'm doing while I have the oven preheating to 550 degrees. And I also, the last few minutes, I put in there a 9 by 13, two 9 by 13s, one for each recipe that I'm making, with some oil on the bottom. Probably between a quarter cup and a half a cup of oil. And I'm letting that heat up. And I'm also taking out any big pieces that didn't shred up. Next, I'm seasoning this with some white pepper and salt. And I do not measure, and there's never a way of knowing if it's accurate until we actually eat it. And hopefully you mix it well. Because like when I made it last week, Shabbos, I didn't mix it very well, and some slices had a ton of salt and some didn't have at all. So you just have to do a very good job. I'm gonna mix it again, but first I'm gonna add the hot oil from the 9 by 13s that we preheated, and we're gonna mix all of this together to combine. And finally, we can divide this mixture between the two 9 by 13s. Now, usually I would just take the bowl, tip it over, and add everything into the pan. But I'm working with a very limited space. As I was cooking, I wasn't cleaning up after myself. So, like, every spare inch of the counter space is taken. So, this was the only way I was able to do it. Get both of the pans close together, and just add the mixture by hand like this. But at the end, any extra liquid stayed in the bowl, I add that into the pan. A lot of people will add like water on the top or seltzer over the top. I don't, because with the amount of eggs and onions that I use, there's so much liquid there that by adding it in, it makes it extremely fluffy once it's baked. The reason why people will add seltzer is because that gas will add that fluff and that ear. But with all the liquid that I have in there, I don't find it necessary to add any water or seltzer to it. I'm also going to level out the top, and this is going to go into the 550-degree oven for an hour. After the hour, we're going to lower the oven temperature to 350 and bake it for an additional 30 minutes. And at this point, my daughter's done with wrapping up all of the granola bars, so she's also adding the twine and the tags. She made her own custom tags, and she's going to add that into her Mishloach Manos bags for her friends. While she's doing that, I am going to get the franks and blanks out of the pan and onto a tray. And it was super easy to slide it out. Um, in the ramekin, it was a mistake to do it straight in the ramekin because my ramekin is the exact size for the amount of sauce that we made here. We're making a honey mustard dipping sauce for it. Um, so you'll see, I put it first into the ramekin, but as I'm mixing it, it's really tough, so I'm going to transfer it into a different bowl. I'm mixing a quarter cup of mayonnaise, a quarter cup of Dijon mustard, and 3 tablespoons of honey. Once I got it all mixed, I actually transferred it into a plastic bowl. It's bigger than the space that the ramekin created, but it's gonna rest on top. I'm okay with it. Once people take a few, it's gonna fall down onto the plate, and it'll be fine. There's anyways way more dipping sauce than this amount of franks and blanks would need. But it looks really good. Really excited to try it. So the last things to do is to actually finish our Mishloach Manos. So over here we are assembling the boxes that we're going to be putting our food items in. So the white and pink ones are what my daughter is giving, and now we're assembling the ones that my husband and I are giving. And the online listing, this looks like it was white with a black design. That's why I got the black and white food grade wax paper. Um, but I'm okay with it since I have the twine and the very natural, like brown tags to go with it. So it worked out okay. Um, yeah, so we're just gonna assemble everything, all of the boxes that we'll need, and then we'll be able to fill them up. The last thing we're doing is we're gonna put some labels on the outside of the boxes so that the people that we give it to know that we gave it to them, because we like to drop it off early in the morning. The last 2 years, we woke up early, or actually, no, the same time that we do on a regular day, and we would be out on the road first thing in the morning and drop it off. And last year, I think we finished our route in like an hour and a half. Like from when we walked out of our house till we got back in. And had we done it during the day when there's already a lot of traffic, if you live in a Jewish neighborhood, you know that on Purim Day there's traffic everywhere. I would estimate that it would take us probably between 4 and 5 hours to do the route that we did, that we need to do, to drop off to all our people. So because we're dropping it at the doors and we're not going to see most of these people, we want them to know that we gave them this little package. Now that we have all that ready, we can get to assembling our Mishloach Manos. So we're starting off with some beer. I got Coors Banquet. It's made with Colorado River Spring water, and it's really tasty. Next, I'm putting in the oatmeal cookies that we wrapped up with the tags on it, and I'm just placing it in any little gap that I can find between the beer and the box. And then last, I am adding in the popcorn as well. And the popcorn I'm maneuvering a bit as I am closing up the boxes because they are the chunkiest. Actually, the beer is a bit chunkier, but that's what needs maneuvering to be able to close it up. And once I got all of them filled, I'm just going one by one and getting them closed up and ready to be handed out. So I'm giving you here a very quick overview of all the food that we have over here. There was sesame chicken and pepper, steak and chicken fingers, some rice, green beans. Over here is some cabbage noodles. This is farfalle. I don't know what the English name for it is. Farfalle, I think, is either. This is just vegetables. This is my potato kugel. Another rice. Is this chicken and rice actually? This is franks and potatoes. And then we'll have over here soups with noodles and matzo balls. And the soup over here wasn't warm yet, that's why it looks like that. And then these are the deli taschen that I made and the franks and blanks. And then this is on the table. There's some salad, dips, there is fish, and there's the challah, and just a bunch of delicious food. And there was so much food. Everything was delicious. Not just what I made, everything was. And yeah, we dressed up like cowgirls. And I think it all came together really nice as a family. The theme worked. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video and seeing a little bit what a Jewish holiday might look like, because not all the Jewish holidays I can bring you along for it. And I hope if you enjoyed this, you'll hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.